So thank you all for joining us. I know this is strange times to be attending book events in, but we're all making do and making it work. A little bit about the bookstore. If you're not local, Belmont Books is located in Belmont, Mass, which is outside of Cambridge. We do have a pretty robust event schedule through October right now. So tomorrow we have Elizabeth Seagrin in conversation with Meredith Goldstein of the Boston Globe, and they're discussing Seagrin's The Rocket Years, how your 20s launch the rest of your life. And then next week, on Tuesday at this time, we have Susan Buttenweiser in conversation with Virginia Pye. That one is going to be great. They're going to be talking about Susan's debut short story collection. But we pretty much have 2 to 3 events each week through October, so definitely check out our calendar. Pretty much standard book event here. We will intro the authors, they will talk, and then we will have a Q&A. The chat function is open if you want to comment or say anything, and that's what we'll use to do the Q&A portion. We have everyone's mics muted. We ask that you also keep your cameras turned off if possible, just for less distraction. And then that's all the housekeeping stuff I have. And so we'll get right into the intros. Kerri Arsenault serves on the board of the National Books Critics Circle, is the book review editor at Orion Magazine, and contributing editor at LitHub. I believe she mentioned a transcript up on LitHub as well that you could probably go check out. She received her MFA in creative writing from the New School and studied in Malmo University's Communication for Development Master's Program. Her writing has appeared in Freeman's, LitHub, Oprah.com, and the Minneapolis Star Tribune, among others. She lives in New England. Milltown is her first book, which is quite an accomplishment. Yeah. Elizabeth Rush's journalism has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Atlantic, among others. She is the recipient of numerous fellowships and grants, including the Howard Foundation Fellowship, awarded by Brown, and the Science and Society Journalism Award from the National Association of Science Writers. Can either of you just attend or win a thing with like 2 words in the title?
I was going to say, Elizabeth, I put Elizabeth's whole bio on my website, and it was like 40 pages long, and I put, and me, this is my first book. It was terrific.
That just tells me I need to shorten my bio. That's sort of embarrassing.
She received her MFA in nonfiction from Southern New Hampshire University and her BA from Reed College. She lives in Rhode Island, where she teaches creative nonfiction at Brown. Thank you both. I'm going to depart, but I will be back for the Q&A.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say a sort of a way of introducing Kerri's book that I recently had a son. He's 3 months old, and you might hear him screaming in the background. This is actually the first night that I have not put him to bed since he was born. We did a test run 2 nights ago. He was fine, but you never know. And I actually read Kerri's book really late into my pregnancy at a point in time where like the only thing I was capable of reading was the Harper's Index. And it was one of the few things that just broke through that mental fog. And I think in part that's because it felt like, to me, an invitation to see this place where I'm from in greater depth. So I grew up in Beverly, Massachusetts, about 40 minutes north of Boston. It's a mill town. It's an industrial town. It's also, has its pockets of extreme wealth. And I grew up there, but I also sort of never knew that much about the place and the deep environmental impact that the mill and the shoe factory had on the way the city was constructed, but also the way the people related to the city itself. And I felt like, if I ever read about New England, it was like John Updike's version of New England. And suddenly this book,
who's from Beverly, right?
Who's from Beverly. I mean, he lived like down the street from me. And he's called Providence, where I live now, the armpit of New England, which I strongly disagree with. But, that gives you a sense of like how he views different places and the people who inhabit them. Anyways, Kerri's book spoke to me of the place where I was from in a language that felt really familiar and helped me to see it with greater depth and clarity. And it felt to me very much like a vision of New England that was the one that shaped my childhood, but also was persistently left out of the literary renderings of New England as such. And so and it was also a page turner, and it's lyrical, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And I felt a great sort of familiarity in Kerri's voice. And so it's an honor to be here with her tonight as she launches this book into the world. And I was hoping she could tell us a little bit about it and perhaps do a reading, give us a short introduction to the sound and the texture of this book in this place.
Thank you. I felt an instant familiarity with not only Elizabeth's writing, her book Rising, which I just want to hold up right here. It's an incredible book. But with her, as you can see, we really have never met in person, but we have this very deep affection, I think, for each other. It was and I think it's because of the place where we grew up and we grew up in such a way that was very similar, I think, in some ways. But to give you, I'll take you to the landscape of Milltown. I mean, this book is about a mill town. It's a narrative nonfiction book. The genre is still up for grabs. Everybody's defining it as something different. I'm going to say it's maybe a bit of investigative journalism, narrative nonfiction, cultural criticism, perhaps, memoir. Did I say that? But it examines a lot of things. I mean, but on the bigger scale, maybe the unbuilding of the American dream and the working class. I'd say the hazards of leaving and loving a home, and the ambiguous nature of toxics and disease are the three big things that I look at. And instead of gabbing about it, I'll just I'll introduce you, pretend you're sitting by my fireplace and you're eating something delicious that I made, because I do like to feed people. I'm going to read from the beginning, because I think that's a good place to start. And it starts at my parents' home and the house where I grew up, which is where a lot of stories start, at home, I think. So what goes around comes around. From the porch steps of the house where I grew up, you'll see the end of the road. There, the pavement dips down to reveal the town's only traffic light, the gas station, and the roof of the Family Dollar store. Behind the store lies the Androscoggin River, and just beyond, the paper mill's largest smokestack emerges like a giant concrete finger. From anywhere in town, you can orient yourself to this stack or by the ever-present ka-chink, ka-chink, ka-chink of the mill's conveyor belts, and find your way home even from a pitch-black walk in the woods. When mill shutdowns occur for holidays or layoffs, the smokeless stacks resemble the diseased birch trees dying throughout New England. To the right of the porch, you'll see a street of clapboard homes, silent but for the occasional snarl of a jake brake on a logging truck. A mile or two out of town, the road narrows and small creeks knit through pastures, shadowed by hills, a working farm or two, a long straight road, cut hay, muddy cow paths, rotting leaves or black ice, depending on the time of the year. The seasons they calendared our lives. My mother stayed home while my father worked. Her making pot roast, him making smokestack money. As kids, we explored the world through textbooks and made classroom dioramas of what we thought a Mayan village or a Midwestern dairy farm looked like. The rest of the world seemed to be in New Hampshire or Canada. Families didn't go on overseas vacations and rarely traveled interstate. Our lives were focused inward: Red Sox games, union strikes, and grousing about the weather. Monumental philosophical ideas were surfacing across America: feminism, environmentalism. However, there were no movements in Mexico, Maine, but for the people walking across the mill's footbridge to work. We were more likely to dry bras on a clothesline than burn them. We lived in a shrinky-dink world where everything was there, just smaller. We were lucky in this, felt safe with our doors unlocked at night, and ameliorated most of our sins within latched doors of St. Teresa's confessional. At nighttime football games, we watched our fire-twirling majorettes toss their batons skyward in the spinning, blazing fan. They caught them dead center every time. Those kerosene-soaked batons in the dusk of autumn, they smelled like permanence. Overall, what we needed, we had. Everyone knew everyone, and we liked it that way. For what other way was there? It was quite the place, my mother always says. There was never any reason to leave. In our nuclear family of 7, we always had enough food, plenty of hand-me-downs, some spanking, and an unspoken love for each other because, frankly, nobody really spoke much about love at all. The drowsy dusk of summertime, when the sun dipped under the foothills and the humidity of the day invaded kitchens and bedrooms, people flocked to their porches. There they chatted while night knit itself into a tight blanket. As the sun sank one by one, mimicking fireflies, house lights flicked on and porch lights flicked off, and people streamed inside for the evening. The sound of clinking dishes, faint music, vehicles purring, and light as vapor laughter scented the air. Night fell like a bruise. Things stayed in this balance, with minor adjustments every now and then, until America's working class towns started to ebb alongside the industries that nourish them. The future? We knew nothing of it. Our horizon trembled like a fragile convex meniscus, brimming away from the landscape that held it. All of what was before us was not as bright as what had passed. The end.
So what a beautiful scene setting. And truly it carries me into the heart of this town of Mexico, Maine, and the mill that defines your life, that both gives your family life and in many ways takes that life away. I'm wondering, I feel like it's such a cliffhanger. So, without giving away what's happening in this book entirely, I'm hoping both that you can tell us a little bit more about how it got started. Like, this is your first book, and
Yeah.
thanks, Kerri, but you ain't no spring chicken. So, what made you, when did you know that you were writing a book? What made you say, okay, I'm going to write a book about Mexico, Maine, this place where I'm from? How did that start to solidify? When did that start to solidify?
When I started writing about it in form of genealogy. I was doing a lot of genealogy research, but I had a lot of friends reading pieces for me, really just like paragraphs at a time, and would say, this is really interesting. I don't know anything about this landscape or this town or this kind of life, working class life. And to me, it was just very ordinary and boring. And I thought, who wants to read about this? So I think it was a combination of, over the years, people telling me this was interesting to read about. And it probably took me 7 years to actually believe them, 7 or so. But the reason I started writing it too was just, like I said, I started looking at some family genealogy, and I found my grandfather's obituary, and it had some town in Canada where he was born, and it told me other information I had never known. So I started to track down these pieces of information and try to find a little more about him. And then years later, my father and I drove to Prince Edward Island, where he was supposedly born, and I realized that the name of the town was actually wrong on his obituary and his death certificate. So then I thought, well, if that's wrong, what else is going to be wrong in records? And it got me thinking about just records and facts and things that Maine was about too. I started sort of looking down pathways I probably had no thought of looking down, but it started with the family tree and people telling me I should talk about these people, that they were interesting and their lives were fascinating. And finally, when I believed them too, I thought, this is true. And like you said, I didn't feel like this was a book in narrative form that had been written yet in this narrative nonfiction way. So like a lot of historical stuff and people helicoptering in and, journalists and writing about it and then leaving. But like somebody actually from within a community. And I should just say to everybody, this isn't, the one thing I didn't describe it as is an expose, so it's not that. So if you've come here expecting that, I mean, it may be a little bit in some ways, but I know it's complicated. It's not that, and I don't come, go ahead, say it.
I was gonna say, I feel like, to be honest, when I started reading Milltown, I had no idea what it was going to be about. So literally, you exist in this, we exist in a small world of environmental writers, and Kerri's like always sort of like in that nebulous arrangement of folks that are trying to get together, have conversations in the Providence area. And, so everyone was all excited for Milltown, and I genuinely didn't know what it was about. And an advanced reader copy landed on my doorstep, and I thought, like, I'm going to give it a shot. And as I started reading, I was like, oh, this is an Erin Brockovich tale. Like, at first I thought, okay, this is about a woman uncovering in a meticulous way the long-term environmental impact of this paper mill on the town where she's from and on the people that she loves. And yet it's really not that. So I'm so surprised to even hear you say that it didn't start with the mill. I always kind of thought it would have started with the mill, but now
no, it started with my family. Yeah, it started missing information. But then, obviously, as you go through the book, you see me research I end up investigating the line between toxics and industry, which my family worked in this paper mill for 3 generations, I should say, since 1901, since it opened. So the two were always intertwined, the town, including my family, people, and the mill. So when I was researching my family, I had to inevitably research the mill. And so those parallel tracks ended up, getting very closely paralleled. So yeah, it started with that obituary, funny enough.
And I'm so curious then, like, one thing that I'm really fascinated by as a writer is the way that when you run two things that are maybe seemingly dissimilar alongside one another, they can throw a different kind of light and make you see what might feel sort of like a standard conversation through a different lens. So, it's not just a memoir about your family or about growing up in Maine, and it's not just a book that's an investigation of the impact that this mill has on the environment and the people around it. It's something weird and in the middle. And I think by doing that, you make both sort of both things uncanny and strange, and force me to see them in a new light. I'm curious, how much you think about that structured, are you running 2 parallel stories? Are you braiding these 2 stories? And do you think there's a way in which
I think
seeing in a conversation makes both new somehow?
I think I should have looked it up, but there's a place in here. Well, let me say so first of all, I'll give you an example. I'll give everybody here an example, and maybe you'll remember this, but an example of the 2 parallel stories. It comes about sort of halfway through the book when I'm writing in real time. It starts in 2009, I should say, ends in 2019. In about 2013, my father gets sick of cancer, which was not part of the book originally, but became part of the book, as well as a lot of people in this book actually get cancer and die in the book as I'm writing the book. So one thing about the 2 parallel things is, like, my father was on oxygen. He had lung cancer and esophageal cancer from asbestosis in the mill. And so he was on oxygen, and they would come in and measure his oxygen levels, and do all this stuff. And they were poking and prodding him and doing all this stuff. And then as I was doing research of the river, the Androscoggin River, which is basically the cover of the book, that is our river. It's shaped like that, which also looks like a DNA strand. So, as I was researching the river at the time, was one of the top 10 polluted rivers in the United States. They were also testing the oxygen levels and putting oxygen in the river to keep it healthy. And I was like, okay, well, those 2 things, he was basically like, both the river and my father were these like receptacles, these recycling units for the mill. So they were, in fact, it was not like just the people depended on the mill and the mill, they were so intertwined that they were like becoming the same thing. The nature and people were both acting as recycling units. But as far as the, how to structure it, I was trying to find this. There's at one point, I didn't know, I mean, I started uncovering mountains of information. People would send things to me in milk crates and, full of rat piss. And, my mother had documents that we dig out of the barn, and I was, emailing genealogy, all kinds of crazy things, and scientific reports. And I didn't belong to any institution, so I would just email people who worked in academia and be like, can you download this thing for me? And then I get it. And I was like, I don't want that. Can you download this other thing? So I like used up all my chits for that. And then finally got somebody's password at Columbia. And I was like, just downloading tons of shit. I have so much stuff. Anyway, so all that stuff was coming at me, and I was like, what am I going to do with this? I don't know. So I started just putting it in chronological order. And this kind of answers your other part of your question. Is it sounds common sense, but I put it in chronological. So I get something from here and I get something from here, and I have my genealogy, and I put it in chronological order, and it started telling me a really bigger story than it was about my family. So it's like, okay, my father got cancer here, but what happened 10 years before that? Oh, he was asbestosis diagnosis, and then they had these asbestos class action suit. You know what I mean? It was all this stuff that was like kind of lined up, and then I began to see it. I began to see it a lot clearer, but really the stuff rained on my head. And as far as structure, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I don't know what I'm saying.
I was gonna say, how did you navigate both that quantity of information, but also how did you navigate that as that information is fundamentally changing the shape of the lives of the people that you love? Are you sharing the information that you're finding out with your family and,
well,
friends, or is it not welcome? What is that? How do you manage what you learn, and both on the page and in real life, I guess?
I never thought of that, but nobody really asked me as I was working on it, including my mother. I don't know if she's on here, but she'd be like, oh, your book, it was like this, I don't know what it was. Probably not even my siblings. Nobody really asked exactly what I was doing. I mean, I did share it with Terry Martin, who was really critical in this book, and she and I shared a lot of information. Yeah, nobody really asked me how it was affecting them. There was one person, though, in the book that I had come across, this aplastic anemia study they did in our town that showed astronomical rates of aplastic anemia in our town, for a town of like 2,000. Ours was 2,000 people, and there was maybe, I don't know, 6,000 in the other town, the two towns, very small towns. And the rate was like crazy big. And I had a lunch with her, coffee with her, and this was Dean Gilbert's mother. And I told her about this study. I said, yeah, what did you think of that study? And she was like, what study? And her daughter had aplastic anemia, and she'd never heard of this study, that it was done in our town. So I did share that with her, and she's like, really? Anyway, it was pretty disturbing that they never told her that was happening. But I guess everybody's going to know now what the book's about. But taking all that information too was, structurally, I think the structure of a book, I was talking to Rebecca, who's on this call, about this, structurally, it comes out of the material. And since this material is coming at so many different places, and I felt like it was both, like it was the structure of this river that we were on. It was so crooked and crazy, and so many twists and turns and tributaries and movements. And I felt like I had to follow them all to find that kind of truth that I was looking for, whatever that truth means. But I felt like I had to follow them all down. But at the same time, a river, like I say, always moves forward, and a river always accumulates stuff, right? As you know. So it's like, it was accumulating, the river was accumulating as I was accumulating. And so like at the end of the river, before it dumps into the Atlantic Ocean, which is where ours does, well, into a bay, into an ocean, it was just like this mass of stuff, and weirdly, I did get like 80 pounds of boxes the day before this was due. So that literally happened too. I mean, you don't make this stuff up,
So what are some of the things that you wish made it into the final book, but that didn't? Like, it sounds like so much accumulated in the process, and I'm curious
Yeah.
about what you ultimately had to leave out.
I wish I could have written more about how our mill burns tires for fuel. It was something that as you'll see in the book, I tried to track down to it was an impossible vernacular, to understand that I went to, experts. I didn't go to tons of experts, but I did go to experts in this, and the vernacular was like, so I think I'm a pretty good reader. I'm a book critic and I'm not stupid, but I had a really hard time tracking that down. It's something I really want to examine more. I wish I could have had more people in this book, maybe more people that lived. That would have been nice. Not to be sarcastic, but seriously, I don't know. There's a lot. I think the tires is the thing that disturbs me, and I'll tell people why, is because I found out through just the basic research I did is that they burn tires for fuel. It's totally legal. Tires are not a hazardous waste in this form. They're considered a fuel, and I've read a few reports that they arguably pollute more than they did like in the 1970s when our river was so badly polluted. So because of loopholes in the laws of how they burn them, and they're burning them for their own fuel source. You see how dry it gets? This is why it didn't all go in the book. It's suddenly like, everybody's like, people like checking out. Don't check out yet. But I want to write about that in an interesting way. And it's really hard to, because it just gets super boring, but it's super frightening.
That's how I feel about flood insurance reform. I'm
Right.
like, it's so wonky. Yeah. I swear it's really important and really fascinating, but it is so muddled in acronyms that it just becomes really difficult sometimes to like keep any attention.
Yeah, and that difficulty too, in writing this, I thought, who in the heck has time? What ordinary people working at a Milltown job can have the time or the strength to go through this mass? And like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I brushed the surface of some of it. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I know more than I think I do. But what ordinary person has time to do this? And I think that really bothered me, and it kept me motivated to tell this story. It's an untold story that nobody has the time to do in a working class town, or from a working class town, or if you're just working 9 to 5, or you're just trying to feed your kids, or like get to work, or buy a car, or like buy 2 shoes for your children. Like there's one kid in this book who has 1 shoe, or feed them. Like people in my town, 4 to 5 kids are hungry. So who has time to worry about this stuff?
It also reminds me of something that I found as I worked on sort of which communities are getting funding to adapt to climate change, and realizing that the places that get funding in particular for a very special kind of retreat solution, which is managed retreat, are places where they're wealthy enough to pay municipal employees to navigate that process for them to apply for federal funds. Right. If their town isn't wealthy enough to have that civil servant or flood insurance, floodplain manager, then they're not going to get the money that they need to adapt. And I feel like it's not just about an individual person having time to track this all down. It's also about the fact that probably your town isn't wealthy enough to have someone who's actually, breathing down the neck of the state and city municipal jurisdictions and the EPA saying this really isn't tenable for residents.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I was talking to Terry Martin after. She's like, I hope she's on here. She's like, don't say that they're not doing anything illegal. And I don't know that they're doing anything illegal or legal, but my suspicions, there are some nefarious things happening, or have been. I don't know the current mill owner. But I don't know what I was going to say about that.
I mean, half the people in your book die in your book because of different forms of cancer. Like something is that's seriously wrong with this picture.
Seriously wrong. And it's funny you say it, because I'm starting this project, and I'm saying this at every event, is that a a lot of people are on board already from my town or who have lived there, or if a representative of their family, I'm gonna take headshots of them and do their diagnosis and their prognosis and just put like a yearbook photo, like it's gonna be called Cancer Yearbook, so that it's just gonna be this mass of like headshots. And how can you ignore that evidence, you know? I mean, that's the problem, is trying to find straight evidence from, you know, toxics to disease. It's a path that is about as twisty as a river, you know, or a family tree, really. I should say too, like, oh, go ahead if you have a question. I want people to know, it's funny. I mean, you all heard me read, well, maybe all of you weren't here, but I was at one event and I read first, and he was like, oh my God, I was so surprised by your reading, because he was expecting, like, the way we talk about it is different than the way it comes across. But it's really about, I think the thing that makes this urgent, it's not, you know, the people are ordinary in this kind of slow violence kind of happening, but the thing is urgent is that these are people that are dealing with it, which is what we were just saying. These are people dealing with this flood insurance, or you know, they're all dying of cancer. This is what makes it urgent. You just see a whole community like just facing disaster, toxic disaster, really a slow 120-year toxic disaster.
Absolutely. I think, you know, it's funny to think about, you know, is this a journalistic project? Is this a literary project? And there's always this impetus, I think, often in journalism, that you have to make something urgent. You have to make it appeal to the 24-hour news cycle. And so when we often encounter stories about sort of environmental pollution, I think they all tend to look somewhat similar in order to sort of be shoehorned into that narrative device that the news media tells you you have to fit this story into in order to even get it published in the newspaper. And to me, those are often the stories that I sort of zone out as I read. I'm like, oh, I know, it's so bad. It's polluting. Oh. But your book was the opposite for me. I literally, like, you know, was wrapped the entire way through. And I think that has, you know, to do with a lot of different things, both like the incredible lyricism of your voice and the earnesty of your voice, the way that you'll sort of admit the limits of your own understanding and not trying to pretend like you have, you know, this entire story. You can encompass it in your hands. But I also think it has to do precisely with what you're talking about, which is focusing on the lives of people for whom these decisions matter. It's not a book about the decisions. It's about the people who live with them without a lot of agency.
Right. The power is, it's always been in these mill towns. And I think there's probably people here on this phone call that it's not like the olden days where the guy owned the shop, and, you know, the power is, the seats of power are far away. You don't even know, I mean, I don't even know where half of this stuff came, you know, the regulations, where are they even coming from? I tried to track those tire regulations, and it was an exercise in like futility beyond compare. So, I mean, the book's also, go ahead, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead.
I think it's also a correction, besides the environmental aspect. There's a lot of corrections to a lot of myths about Maine, which you spent some time in Maine, so you know a little bit of what I talk of. And I wonder if, I wish I could see people raise your hand if you've been to Maine, probably like everybody, but it's pretty close.
If you've been to Maine, you definitely know that there's some kind of sign on the highway that says something like "Welcome to Vacation Land" or "Entering
Maine, the way life should be," you know.
Yeah.
And every time I see that sign, I get really pissed off because, you know, I never lived in that Maine. I never saw that Maine, and I think, and it's not that Maine's not beautiful, and even my town is beautiful. It weren't for that big giant concrete middle finger in the middle of it, but it's beautiful there. But if you just go to the coast and you go and you have your blueberry cobbler and you have your lobster dinner and your taffy and all that stuff, or all, you know, then you're kind of forget it. You think everything's okay, and it ignores the people in the peripheries. And you experience that too in your book. I mean, people in the peripheries just sort of getting more and more peripheral. I mean, it's happening. It's even worse now. I mean, it gets worse every day. I can't even describe it. Just whether it's poverty, class, race, people in the periphery are basically treated like recycling units or garbage, literal garbage. Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me, I don't know if this comment will be very useful or not, but I had some dear friends go up to Rangeley this summer. They said, oh, it's COVID times, and we, spent a long time looking for Airbnbs, and we eventually found one, but it's way up there in Maine. And my response was like, oh, Rangeley, gorgeous part of the world. Like, how did you like it? And they were like, well, the town was kind of disappointing. And I think that
my house, yeah.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think that they were expecting the Maine of the coast. They were expecting,
pretty inland.
The ice cream store with 1,000 flavors. Yeah. And it is, I was like, welcome to Maine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
It is. I was a little disappointed to hear that, but.
Well, people don't know. And this is a correction to that. I mean,
people don't know.
They don't know. And it's also got a lot of Acadian and Franco-American history in it, and about my family and both sides of my family. That was also another story that has a lot of misconceptions and corrections that I try to make, including like taking down Anne of Green Gables and Longfellow. I got married at Longfellow's church. I should say that. I got married at Longfellow's church, and the guy who founded our paper mill, that was his church too. So we have this like tryst at his church with Longfellow, but I take him to task. There's a lot of myths out there that are wrong about Franco-Americans, Maine, working class people for sure. And I think you said that. I don't let myself off the hook, and I don't let anybody else off the hook either. Like, I think these people come across as just human. Nobody's perfect. Doc Martin, who could be the hero in the book, is an emotional abuser to his wife, but he actually was kind of a hero in the town too. So it's complicated, and people are complicated, and that's part of this too. It's like ambiguous and complicated, and there's no black and white answer to this. There's no, this is good and this is bad. I've had so many people ask, well, was it worth it, the paper mill? And I'm like, so you're asking if my father's death was worth my education? Probably not. Like, I don't know, how am I supposed to answer that? So it's not an answer. The answer is gray somewhere.
Which is, I mean, again, like, what makes the book interesting and robust? You don't tell us what to think. You don't have a preconceived notion about where this is all going to end up or what the payoff should be and whether or not it's worth it. But you still follow the river. Like,
if you think of it, remember those little stupid things we used to get? They had all these dots, and you'd have to like trace and they show like a face. It's like that. Like, I'm giving you all the dots. Here you go. Make a face. Make a little picture of a squirrel or whatever it was.
I want to say one last thing, and then maybe we should open it up to questions from.
So already 7:45. So
yeah. And because I feel like with these Zoom conversations personally, I think they're more interesting when more people are participating in them. And so I want to hear the questions from all of you guys who've tuned in. So if you want to share those, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I think that's how we're going to do this. And think about those as I ask my final question.
You're welcome to put your videos on too, if you want, because we're looking at you now.
Yeah. I was thinking,
tough question.
Oh, do we have questions already?
Yeah. I see Jeanette Clausen says, how did this information change you? Elizabeth, could you answer that for me? No. I think, I had been a bad witness, and I say this in the book, to what was happening in my town and similar communities. So one thing it did was I learned a lot about my community and myself. And interestingly too, I feel like there's so many people in my town and my community reading this book and saying the same things to me. Even my mother, learning, everybody's like learning. The book takes place, I should explain, you're learning alongside me. It's almost like the book is about how the book is written. So people reading it, I have people every day, oh my God, I'm in chapter 2 now, and this happened and this happened. And it's really wonderful because they're experiencing exactly, well, not exactly, but like kind of what I experienced. So that kind of, that change, you know, just the knowledge, but then I also developed, I think, an affection for the community that I did not have, surprisingly. I did not want to write this book because it meant I had to go there all the time. It's not a pleasant place if you suddenly realize it had been poisoning you for 18 years. But then my father got sick and I had to go, and it was the same thing that he was dying of. The whole thing was very complex. And I was in grad school at the time when he got sick, working on this book in the middle of it. So weirdly developed an affection for the town because I realized what makes the town great are the people that live there. I value them a lot. I don't care what political affiliation they are. I don't care what sign they have on their lawn. I don't care. These are people I grew up with and people I know and people I care about. So, we all want the same things. We all want to live and not die, basically. So that's one thing, or a few things. There's another. Can you see the question? I can see them.
I can see them. Stacy says, how do you start gathering info for people in my college from the same dorm, same floor have been diagnosed with thyroid cancer? Where do I start?
Yeah, find out why. I mean, in your same dorm? That is terrifying. Is there some kind of I would test the water for one thing. I don't really know. Is there people here on this phone call that know a lot about cancer? I don't, but I would test the water. I mean, is there radon levels in there that I don't even know if that causes cancer, but I mean, thyroid cancer. But I would also talk with a doctor. That's kind of terrifying. Also, try to figure out what you have in common, Was the dorm recently renovated? That's a good question, Rebecca. Thank you. Wow. I would just start trying to find the similarities too. And that's what I was doing is okay, what's similar? Well, in my case, it was the paper mill, but even that, it's interesting. Proving a cancer cluster was between 94 and 99, she says. It was, yeah, different rules. Wow, so weird. What about the air filter system? Anybody else have any ideas? This is so terrifying to me.
It makes me wonder if you can back out for other years, what happened around your time. Are there similar patterns over a decade? How can you, can you look into who inhabited it over time and see if you see that pattern continue?
Yeah, talk to the people in charge of those dorms and say, other people have cancer, thyroid cancer. Where do I ask? Go to the housing people and ask them and tell them what's going on and make them do tests of all the air ducts and the water and make them test everything. I would. Or is it even happening campus wide and you don't know it? Is there something else happening? Do you live in a mill town? I mean, what's going on environmentally outside the town? Where are you in college, or do you not want to say? I don't know. There's so many things you could do, but I would just start doing it. Framingham. I don't know anything about Framingham. Do you, Elizabeth? No. Anybody? Rebecca? Anybody?
And I think you were going to say proving a cancer cluster is extremely difficult.
Yeah, there's some, if aplastic anemia in my town was, like I said, the rates were astronomical. It was crazy. I mean, and there was children's cancer rates in our town too that were at one time, it was Dana-Farber in Boston in the 90s or late 80s. There were, I don't know, 3/4 of the kids there from my town, with cancer. And Was it a cancer cluster? No, even the doctors there at that hospital called our doctors, our head doctor down there, and was like, what the hell's going on in your town? But proving a cancer cluster is like proving Bigfoot exists, which is in my last chapter. I wish I would have written more about Bigfoot, because I do like Bigfoot. I do like a Bigfoot story. Yeah, it's like trying to find something that doesn't want to be found, which was part of the exercise of my book. If it doesn't want to be found, that's not to discourage you. I still think you should go to the housing people and get tests and get things started. I would. Alumni network, Rebecca says, which is a good idea. Okay, Stacy's like, yes. Go, Stacy. Email me. I'm going to put my email here. I'm kind of curious what happens. We didn't talk much about, we didn't talk anything about Nestle, but I know there's somebody on this call interested in that. So I should tell people there's a whole chapter about, not only did I not do this as an expose because I became intimately involved with the town, I started like a water activist group while I was doing my book. So there's no objectivity here whatsoever.
I mean, that's one of the charms of the book. Like, you're not pretending like you don't have an opinion about any of this.
I think all people that are writing something about something they care about or obsessed with, they have an opinion. I don't know why it shouldn't come through. I mean, it seems crazy to me. Objective news seems crazy.
I strongly agree. And I find that, like, if someone's trying to convince me that they're objective, I just give them the raised eyebrow all the more.
No, it's not possible. Yeah, so Nestle, there's an entire chapter. So if Nestle is coming to your small town in Massachusetts, maybe you should read that chapter first if you get my book. They come into these small towns and they say, oh, we're going to help you. And they take your water supply and sell it at like 1 million times the cost. Not 1 million, but a lot. And who knows what's going to happen with climate change modeling. Sorry, it's 10 minutes out. Go ahead. You have a question?
No, I was just going to say, that also reminds me of one of the challenges of telling a story that doesn't want to be found, which is the question around what you leave in and what you leave out, but in terms of that being what you leave in and what you leave out as it relates to real people and real lives who you don't want to put in further harm's way. What it means to write about Nestle. Were there things that you couldn't write, though you wished you could because you suspected them to be true? Because all the signs pointed in that direction, but at the end of the day, you couldn't prove the cancer cluster. You couldn't prove that X is related to Y is related to Z.
Right, or the people that I didn't want to write about that, had real stories to tell, but they don't want to lose their job, and that happened in your book too. There were certain things, it's really infuriating because they're true and the evidence, the evidence, is there. If you just step back, and that's part of this book too, it's like, if you just step back and look at it all, you're like, of course it's connected to the disease, of course the pollution, but going up close, there's just all this uncertainty that everybody waves around like a magic potion. It's like uncertainty. I mean, we're living in that today, uncertainty. What is truth? What does a word mean? We don't even know. What is our president talking about? Like, there's truths are just like, we don't even know. I mean, we're in an age of uncertain. Everybody says everything's always uncertain, but now like the ground we walk on is uncertain, so trying to prove things.
And I think that that's both true and not true. It's like, I think human beings used to have to be a lot more flexible with the fact that like some of the ground they walked on was uncertain and they were able to adapt to that. Because maybe one day, there would be one day there's a big storm and things are slightly different, but there's a difference between that kind of uncertainty, which is an uncertainty that maybe the comforts of our modern lives have taught us to be guarded against. And there's a different kind of uncertainty, which is the uncertainty that is used to cloak or, distance or confuse
Yeah, it's like this, woo, like what is that, shell game? That's
Yeah.
how I felt. That's what I felt like I was researching this book. And I was like, wait. I want to look at what Alex Schmidt says to everyone here. And then we'll go to Julie's question, which a lot of people ask me. But Alex says, if state agencies have done studies, investigations, or held hearings, for example, Maine DEP or Health and Human Services, or state colleges making a request under Maine's freedom, maybe, okay. You're talking about, Alex, are you talking about the college, about her question about what's giving people cancer in her, yes. That was a much more intelligent answer than mine. I'm like, go find out. Yes, you should do that. And if you need help writing an FOAA like letter, I'm good at that. I wrote one. And here, I want to say this, there's a whole chapter with me like buried in paper in the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. And if they come back to you and say, oh, there's too much information, it's true. There's a lot of stuff in there and they don't organize it. So you really have to go there and look at the documents yourself. There's no person there like filing things neatly and it's not their fault. It's just the way it is. So, you know, if you feel like you're being buffaloed, you're not. It's just because it's super disorganized. That's been my experience. But, and then Julie says, I used to live in Woburn, Mass, and lived there when a civil action was published. Yeah, there was definitely some pushback, disbelief, and defensiveness, in addition to anger. What has the response been from the people you know? Has there been much resentment? Zero resentment or anger. And in fact, here's the common responses I get. I'm so glad somebody wrote this book. I feel seen is another one that like, I can barely say it without like having tears in my eyes. Like to have somebody say that to you, like, to me, that's like, I quit, you know, I did it. Like they feel seen. The only there's not even really pushback. The only thing is the economic developer from Rumford. I always say this, he before my book came out, he commented in the Maine Sunday Telegram. He's like, well, Kerri's book is about the past. So I wouldn't say that's anger, resentment. I would just say that's like the typical answer. They just don't want to deal with it. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to think about it. But if he's really the economic developer, he should really think about this sort of environmental stigma of the town, because nothing's going to happen. They're not just going to like build new sidewalks, which they are doing, and people are going to show up with like money and stores. It's not going to happen. They have to like really think deeply about how they want their community to change, not just be like, that's all in the past, because these toxics aren't in our past. They're in all our bodies right now. Me, you, everybody on this call, you know, they're in our bodies, not in the past, unfortunately. Happy note. Maybe we could say something nicer. No,
I think that's very important.
It's good
in us and in our present. And right now, going into my son as I breastfeed him, like they're our future too. Laurel says, can you speak more about your research process? Did you receive academic training on how to conduct this kind of research, or did you teach yourself as you worked on the project?
Yeah, I have no academic training. I mean, I went to grad school, but I got my MFA in creative writing, and you basically like talk about writing, you don't talk about any of those things. So I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I actually haven't even written for 30 years. So that was part of it. I haven't written anything. If you want to go to the New York Review of Books, you can see what I've been doing in those last 30 years, because I just published an essay called My 86 Jobs. That's what I've been doing, working my ass off to try to do something. I don't know what I was trying to do. So no, I had no training. I wish I would have. You know, you don't get paid a lot for these books. You don't get big advances. Probably won't make a lot of money. So if you don't have any money, it's really hard to get people to help you. I mean, I hired a college girl to help me, because I had so much stuff, and she would help organize stuff and put dates on it and put it in folders for me, because I couldn't keep track of it all. And then I discovered Scrivener, which I use, and Zotero, which I use to organize my research. That was like halfway through the book. So half of it's really organized, and the other half is in that trunk back there. If you can see it. See that trunk under the window? If I open that up, it'd be like a Pandora's box of your nightmares. I also have 30,000 photographs.
That's also just a good reminder to like folks who are interested in doing this kind of work, like take notes on the work, but also take notes on like your daily life and what's happening in it, because sometimes that's the stuff that I forget. And those are often what make the book readable and fun.
Yeah. And start taking footnotes right away because
Yes.
I don't know anything about that. Like Elizabeth, she knows things about that. I do not, but I do now. I will do the next book very differently, whatever that may be. I'm not sure. Sure. Somebody asked that. What am I doing next? I don't know.
Yeah, Geraldine asked if you had any plans for a next book, which I think is a good question to end on.
I know people are asking. I'm going to make stuff up. I'm going to start saying stuff.
Your book just came out and they want to know when the next.
I'm telling everybody, this is my full-time job. Like making this, and we're in this pandemic era, but like I'm going with it. I'm adapting. I think it's wonderful to be on Zoom. There's people, probably Elizabeth and I couldn't do this event in Belmont together because we live in two different places and you're far away and we'd have to get a hotel and she has a baby. It probably wouldn't even happen. What am I working on? I'm just working on a series of essays of things. I'm also working on maybe some fiction because I'm exhausted from all this research. Although fiction is terrifying. I've never written any fiction, but I want to write a biography. I want to write a biography in fiction form, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to mess around with genres a little bit more before I'm done.
Kerri, it's been a pleasure. I just love chatting with you.
I know. Let's do this once a month. We should. Come on.
I would totally be down for that.
We don't have to dress up either. We could just put our pajamas on.
Okay. Drink tea.
How do we applaud on Zoom? You can applaud. Yeah, you can get right on your camera and turn your audio on, Alex. Yes, go do it. No. Thank you guys for coming very much. And I see, this is like seeing that, remember Romper Room? When they'd be like, I see Lisa and I see Drew and I see, there's Julie. Thank you, Julie, for saying nice things about my book. And thanks, husband, for coming, and Rebecca and Lisa and all you people I don't know, but there's Rebecca. Oh, there's Milltown. Yes. Buy the book from Belmont Books.
It is like literally the best book I read all year. Not exaggerating.
Yeah, there's a link in the chat. Belmont Books does shipping and curbside pickup, and we're open now. So feel free to grab it any way you can.
And read hers too. Oh, look, another person. Everybody hold up your Milltown book. No. Got one. Yes. I think I'm going to take a picture. No, I'm just kidding. Thanks. Do we have to go? I guess we do. If anybody has questions, feel free to email me. If you lost my email, it's on my website. It's just public. I don't care. Email me. But don't email me your manuscripts and ask me to read them because I won't. Not going to do it.
Love that straightforward attitude, Kerri. Yeah.
Don't send me your poetry and don't ask me.
As long as I can answer in a paragraph.
Don't ask me to pick, if you could pick my brain, because my brain is picked. Thank you.
Take care. Keep enjoying the book launch. I'm going to keep cheering Milltown.
Thank you so much.
Such an important contribution.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all for coming.